Tokyo, Japan.
Tokyo, the city I am based in, does not have one central business district or a city center of sorts, being the largest, or at least one of the largest metro areas in the world, depending on how you count it. Well, the city is massive, and a ubiquitous part of Japanese urbanism is the many red light districts that dot the cities of Japan, and that have been for centuries an integral part of the overall society. But things are changing. Men and women are changing, as is their relationship between the genders.
Yeah, a lot of things have changed in the last 20 or 30 years all over the world, especially due to the widespread adoption of the internet and the availability of basically all the information on the planet to anyone at any time, and the ability to communicate with people outside of the same cultures as you. So we have been seeing a shift because we've been hearing voices that haven't really been heard in the past. Trans people, people of color, women, like all sorts of issues that just were not at the forefront are now at the forefront today. Genderqueer people, all sorts of people. So our relationships with each other have changed accordingly and will continue to change. This happens all the time. All throughout human history, you see the relationships between people and their own identities change over time. It's basically the only constant you see throughout history is that change of people and their cultures. And that's fine. That's good. People grow, people change, societies grow and change with them. That's sort of how it all works. So painting it as a negative thing is not only profoundly ignorant, but futile. You can't stop society from changing. It's like the one thing society always does.
But in Japan, like much of the Western world, it's seeing not only the continued denigration, deconstruction, and dismissal of all things masculine, but many young men are simply opting out of society.
Society and the way that it's changing is not in any way denigrating or disparaging masculinity. What we're recognizing is perhaps trying to work on issues that are toxically masculine. You see this, for instance, in the fact that male suicide rates are incredibly high. We see this in the fact that male homelessness is incredibly high. We see this because men are not creating the same sort of social networks that women tend to have with their friends and family. Men tend to be very solitary and feel that they should deal with their problems on an individual level instead of taking them and getting help from others. And that results in a lot of negative outcomes for men and society as a whole. So, as a society, we're trying to say, hey, let's all be more open about our problems, about our feelings, whatever. And that's fine. That doesn't make you any less masculine. It's just being masculine in a healthier way.
And there are many reasons for this. But one of the most overlooked and potentially clear explanations for this phenomenon and the ever-increasing feminization in men the world over, well, in a word, testosterone, or lack thereof it.
This is going to be about soy boys. I think H-Bomber guy had just about the final say on that, but you know, do you?
A big thanks to Raid Shadow Legend.
I need to start getting sponsors like Raid Shadow Legends, because apparently they'll just pay anyone to hawk their shit. Always with the B-roll of the women in bikinis and stuff.
Worse than that which can be found in Japan, and specifically in its adult movie industry. The balance, in fact, is so bad that an article published a few years ago tallied the total number of male performers in the country at around 70, in contrast to the approximately 10,000 female performers.
That probably has to do with the Japanese culture that tends to be incredibly conservative. Women can also, for instance, in Japan, because of the internet, be adult performers online in a solo capacity basically do an OnlyFans or something like that, or produce their own independently made adult films. I think, statistically, I could be wrong, but it seems to me statistically, people who are attracted to women are more likely to seek out pornography in which those women are on their own, as opposed to the opposite. I'm sure there are people who are into watching men alone in an adult context, but it's certainly not something you see as much as you see of women, right? Okay.
In fact, it's gotten so bad that the 85-year-old Shigeo Tokuda, who is the undisputed, as per his entrance into the Guinness Book of World Records, he is the undisputed world's oldest adult video performer.
How old is Ron Jeremy? Ron Jeremy age. In fairness, I don't think Ron Jeremy works anymore. He's 67.
And his colleague, the male performer that goes by the stage name Shimiken, well, he is the busiest male actor in Japan, and he previously tweeted a couple of years ago a cry for help.
What I'm hearing is if you want to be a male porn star, get yourself a ticket and a visa to go to Japan, and you might have a pretty good time. You might have a better shot than coming to, like, California and trying to get into the adult film industry. Just a thought.
In August 2014, when he wrote that in this industry, the number of
Oof, Ron Jeremy has assaulted women? That's unfortunate.
male performers in Japan is less than that of Bengal tigers. And with 4,000 new movies coming out every month, the number of male actors simply isn't enough. And mirroring the Japan adult movie industry, not only in Japan are younger people having less and less sex, but this phenomenon...
That has to do with Japan's incredibly toxic work culture. I'm sure we've all read about this, but basically they value incredibly intense working hours, even worse than that here in the United States. They value the appearance of work over actual productivity. People fall asleep at their desks all the time, and that's seen as like a positive thing. It's an incredibly toxic work culture. And at some point, it's going to backfire. I think it already is in Japan, because their economy's suffering, because there are fewer births and stuff, because there are fewer relationships. So things will at some point fundamentally change one way or the other, because they have to. This happens in society. Society will come up against an issue, and then that issue will force the society to change. That's how everything has ever worked.
Is also being registered in Western nations as well. In a popular cover story in the December 2018 issue of The Atlantic magazine, titled The Sex Recession, this article used data and argued that young people are launching their sex lives not only later, but are having less sex frequently than members of previous generations.
I mean, you didn't have Netflix in the past, and there were 3 stations, so what else are you gonna do, you know what I mean? I know that's reductive, kind of a bad joke, but I am just saying, like, there's a lot of stuff to distract us nowadays.
Thus, what we are in the midst of.
Society was also in a situation, by the way, where for most of, like, American history, women didn't have the opportunity to go out and build their own lives for themselves. They were basically expected to go and get married and have children at a very young age. So the fact that people have more freedom nowadays to go do things on their own if they don't want to be in a monogamous relationship, that's a good thing. There's nothing wrong with society inherently having less sex if it means that people have the freedom to go out and be the person they want to be and do the things they want to do. That's fine.
Currently is an epidemic of sorts, a lack of virility that is reshaping every aspect of our society, that's not only seeing birth rates plummet, but family formation.
That's good. If we could get fewer people on the planet by people having fewer children, that would be a good thing for the environment and for the people who are here.
Living arrangements, and even the relationship between the genders being redefined. And this is having a profound impact on our culture and our civilization, and that which we will bequeath the coming, ever-shrinking generations of our posterity.
It would be fine if we had fewer people on the planet. What we're currently doing and have been for most of human history is unsustainable. You can't have constant exponential growth in your populations on a planet like this. We have finite resources, and on top of that, employment is scarce because we've increased automation so much. So it would seem to me it would make sense that in the future we should focus on quality of life for people and not quantity of life. So even if people do have kids, maybe they have one kid, maybe they have two kids, and just do sort of a, replacement rate, but they don't have more. I'm not even saying insofar as like a ban on having more. I'm just saying, as a society basically agreeing, hey, we don't need to have a ton of kids for no reason. That'd be fine.
While there has been push in both the West and in Japan for men to drop out of the mating game altogether,
it always shocks me every time I see it, no matter how many times I see it, that these MGTOW people think that they are any substantial amount, that they are a substantial enough part of the population that they are affecting anything. Look, I'm sure there are a lot of MGTOW people on the internet, but it's not something that is concerning. If you want to go your own way and just be on your own, that's fine. It's great. Go do that. It's interesting that you spend all of your time talking about women when clearly you're trying to say that you're going your own way. Like, don't you have other things to focus on? But like, hey, do you, and there's nothing wrong with that.
There are divergent reasons given by men checking out of society.
Rising Phoenix, thank you for continuing your sub.
In the West, with the MGTOW movement that rightly sees a hostile society and legal system that doesn't take men's issues into account and can severely penalize men who find themselves in failed relationships, and these penalties and sanctions can last a lifetime for even a brief liaison with the wrong woman. And thus many MGTOW don't see any point in entering into a new relationship in this trap set for them.
Okay, first of all, not a trap. Second of all, the things that you're talking about in regard to courts often ruling in the favor of, for instance, mothers in custody hearings. I've talked about this before on the channel, but basically this is a result of the fact that a lot of judges are older dudes, and they have very conservative views on men and women, and they view that, of course, that women should get the kids, because women, they're the caregivers, yada, 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 despite the fact that you're both the parents. Same thing happens with alimony and stuff like that. I do think that it makes sense within a relationship, especially if it ends quickly in a divorce or whatever. It makes sense because relationships are often agreements in which one person will shoulder certain burdens, whether they be financial or with certain acts, whatever, and the other person does something else. It can make sense financially to say, hey, in order to basically dissolve this contract that was your marriage, there needs to be some sort of payout for a certain period of time so this other individual can get on their feet and support themselves. That's fine. Same with child support. If you have a kid and you're not taking care of them, like they're not physically in your house, yeah, it makes sense for you to give child support. That's reasonable. That's not unreasonable. And it could go both ways. I don't care. If you're a mom and you get your kids taken away from you and they get given to the dad, you should also pay child support. These are fine. It's fine.
By the legal system and society. In contrast, in Japan, what society has witnessed is the rise of a new class of young men defined as herbivore men or grass-eater men, and it's a term used in that country to describe men that have no interest in getting married or of finding a girlfriend. The term herbivore men is also a term...
MGTOW isn't really conservative. They're pretty right-wing. I would disagree with you on that one.
Used to describe young men who have lost their, quote, manliness, closed quote, because many of them also have very little interest in sex. And put simply, in Japanese society, it is the perceived loss of manliness or masculinity that defines the herbivore man.
The herbivore man. What? Did you just get tired of people making fun of you for saying the word soy boy? So you think you can shift it to calling someone the herbivore man? It's like the term soy boy, but it's smoking a cigar and drinking a whiskey. The herbivore man. It's still soy boy. It's still a stupid argument. Mock Turtleneck, thanks for continuing your sub. Mock Turtleneck says, just got here and this is going to be good. Also, I've been subbed for 3 months, so thank you, Hannah, for all the awesome content. Well, thank all of you for coming to watch it and supporting the channel via subs and bits and everything. It's what makes this possible. So thank you.
Back in the West, while it's not hard at all to see the lack of traditional masculinity in much of the mainstream media as well as academia that has come to define masculinity as toxic.
No, I've explained this many times before, and I don't understand why these people don't get it. Toxic masculinity does not say that all masculinity is toxic. It's specifically talking about things that are seen as masculine within society that are toxic and labeling them as such. For instance, oh boy, what's a good example of this? Let's say you get hurt. Physically, emotionally, let's go with emotionally in this case. Someone cheats on you. Someone cheats on you, which is one of the worst things that can happen to you emotionally. I understand that. And you want to cry about it. You feel heartbroken and you want to reach out to people, your friends, your family that you care about, and talk about how you feel about this. But your brain goes, or other people in your friend group go, suck it up. Don't cry. You're a man. Men don't cry. Men don't share their emotions. Just drink a beer and get over it. That's toxic. It happens to be something that's being reinforced and threatened to you because of your perceived masculinity, and it's toxic in that it is damaging to you to hold your emotions in and avoid them and not share them with people and not create that support network that helps, like, women out, for instance, when things like this happen. It leads to, again, higher suicide rates for men because they don't deal with their problems. It's toxic masculinity. Being a man is not toxic. Specific actions, specific ways of thinking about your masculinity, those can be toxic, and that's what the term means.
It was probably best exemplified a couple of years ago by the BuzzFeed guys, who in an experiment on male attractiveness competed to see who was the hottest of the 4 males that had testosterone levels tested. But like BuzzFeed's readership, or Vox's readership, or Vice's readership, etc., their results were pretty much what you would have expected them to be. To put it into perspective, not a single BuzzFeed beta male met the T-score average. Rather, all of the men tested below the level of a typical 85-year-old man.
Do you understand what average means? Average means that there are people above and below. An average is an aggregate derived from that. So if a certain group of people happen to be lower, that's not unreasonable. That's what happens on averages. It's fine.
Moreover, 3 of the 4 men tested below the average range, and the male that had the highest testosterone level still had a relatively very low T-score.
What does relatively very low mean? That's a weasel word. It sounds to me like one of them did have about average levels, and you're going, well, it technically wasn't exactly average, so it was relatively low. Come on. Don't fudge your data like that.
And what's important and must be noted, and has been noted by Elite Men's Guide, quote, testosterone is what makes a man, closed quote. The hormone indicates muscle mass.
Don't necessarily agree with that one. That's not how gender works.
Body frame, sex drive, aggression, and the amount of hair on your chest.
Did you know that if you don't have hair on your chest, you're not a man? That's ridiculous. Of course you are. Fuck off with that shit. This is literally toxic masculinity, trying to judge other men and their masculinity by arbitrary measurements.
Feed, quote, men, closed quote, were not toxic in their masculinity. They were simply anemic. And this is part of an alarming trend and has given rise to what are now the new slang terms to describe these kind of men. New males, beta males, and soy.
Yeah, happy Puritan. No. I've seen plenty of MGTOWs and incels and people like Coach Red Pill who are like, I would be with a woman if it wasn't for modern society standards. And they often are like, we just want things to go back how they used to be, where women had to be with men. And if they could get some sort of weird 1950s Leave It to Beaver household where they came home and their wife had made them a meatloaf and they're going to rub their feet, they'd be fine with it. They're MGTOW because they don't like the fact that women have agency nowadays and therefore don't have to put up with their bullshit. So yeah, that's conservative.
Boys. And could this phenomenon, the twinkification, if you will, of the modern man,
Hey, don't you badmouth twinks.
have more serious repercussions? Well, in a recent article in Forbes, when talking about the precipitous drop in testosterone, the author Neil Howe had this to say. Studies show that
You'd argue they're libertarian in every regard? Yep, that's right-wing. Libertarianism is a right-wing ideology.
men's testosterone levels have been declining for decades.
And no, many of them are not libertarian. As I said, many of them want women to have fewer choices in life and therefore forcing them to be with men because their role is in the house to take care of children that they sire with their husband. I don't know what MGTOW people you're talking about, but the ones I've seen and covered on this channel are mostly in favor of forcing women to be in traditional marital roles.
And it's revealing a substantial drop in U.S.
Libertarianism is conservative. What? Libertarianism is on the fucking right. Libertarianism, or libertarism, from French libertaire, meaning libertarian, is a political philosophy and movement that upholds liberty as a core principle. Libertarians seek to maximize political freedom and autonomy, which again is something that MGTOW people are not for. They complain about women all the time and the fact that they have the autonomy to go and choose and behave the way that they want to behave and pursue the goals that they want to pursue.
Men's testosterone levels since the 1980s, with average levels declining by about 1% per year. And at the same time, multiple European studies have found that sperm counts are sinking and that the musculoskeletal strength among young men is in free fall.
That probably has more to do with the fact that people spend a lot of time indoors nowadays as compared to, like, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, when people would, go outside and exercise and do physical activity. Now you can, do your TikToks. The only arm exercise these Gen Zers are getting is when they floss. You're welcome.
There are many theories as to why this is the case. Environmental, physical, with such things as obesity, and even the social transformation of gender roles. Whatever the case, you're not the man your father was.
Who cares? If overall testosterone levels lowered in men, who cares? I've known a lot of men in my life, for instance, who certainly seem to suffer from an excess in testosterone. Very ego-driven, aggressive individuals. They're not the best to be around. And if people happen to be born and have lower levels of testosterone, it's fine. Who cares?
Clearly. As previously stated, this transformation of men is having significant effects on not only gender relations, but upon society itself.
You'd probably enjoy WeHuntTheMammoth.com. It's a treasure trove of weird MGTOW and MGTOW-adjacent stuff. Okay, I'll check it out. Hold on. Let me click the link and we can look at that a little bit later. Okay. Thank you.
In a very interesting hypothesis put forward by the author Roy Barzilai, who I have spoken with about this subject in his book, The Testosterone Hypothesis, how hormones regulate the life cycle of civilizations.
I think I was talking with Baja Blast about this too. How the, and correct me if I'm wrong, Baja. She said, like, in genetics, like, the Y chromosome is shrinking over time or something. Something along those lines. Clarify, maybe? That would help. But, like, just find that interesting. If in, like, you know, a million years of humans were to continue existing in some form, if there were basically just all one gender, one sex.
In this book, he outlines how testosterone plays in the aging, motivation, and the influence of all manner of behavior. The book notes, as I have touched upon, the dwindling presence of testosterone in current Western civilization, and I would add Japanese as well. And this explains the negative repercussions of...
I heard a door. Is she about to come in and talk about it? Ah, here we go. Thank you for coming to clarify.
I mean, there isn't much to clarify. It's, what Hannah said is correct at, like, as humans evolve, the Y chromosome has shrunk, and basically, the genes that aren't needed are gotten rid of. So a lot of the genes that are like on the X chromosome can compensate for like the Y chromosome, except for, you know, the SRY gene, which is the sex determining gene on the Y chromosome. So basically it's just evolution via conservation of energy. If you don't need it, it gets taken out over time.
Okay.
But yeah, there's not much to clarify. This is probably the only time I'll see you all. I'm working on a presentation, so have a fun time, chat.
Thank you, fourth year PhD candidate,
Thank you.
Baja Blast. Love you.
And I love you. What?
Chat has said I should kiss you, and I agree. Hope your presentation work goes well.
a
I don't think
society.
anybody said that you should kiss me.
Oh, well, I guess I just wanted to.
I love you.
Love you too.
Cultural elimination of testosterone-driven attributes. Civilizations are adapting living systems created by its members and are influenced by changes in them over time. Or put simply, the forces that drive the life cycles of human cultures and that form the engine of history, what the book argues is our hormones, well, these are the impetus for our history and, more importantly, for our future. Just for the casual observer, one look around and it's not hard to see that our civilization is descending into a pathological state of confusion, degradation, and directionlessness.
Literally everyone who's like a conservative in the history of planet Earth, or right wing, if you want to call it that, has thought this. It's never been true. Chill out.
It's eating itself from the inside out.
Things are changing and I don't understand it, so that must mean the apocalypse is happening. No. Chill out.
We've even lost the desire to replace ourselves, and it doesn't get any more...
Or, consider this. We don't feel the need to constantly breed and increase the size of the population because infant mortality rate and mortality rate in general is so good in the developed world that everyone doesn't have to have kids in order to sustain themselves, their farm, their community. Enough people have kids because they want them that you don't need to force yourself into a situation that you otherwise don't want to do. People have more freedom and agency than ever in what they want to do with their lives. Baha and I, for instance, neither of us wants to have kids, and that's fine. I don't think I'd be a good parent because I don't want kids. My dad was someone who didn't want kids, and he had me anyway, and he was an awful father. So everyone is better off with this new paradigm. People can have kids if they want them, if they're willing to take on that responsibility and be responsible parents who love their children. If you want to live your life and work on other things, I like doing this. I like communicating to people and trying to communicate my ideas to others and entertain, and that's great too. We're all human beings, and regardless of if you're a man, a woman, non-binary, whatever you happen to be, you get to do and be the best version of you, and you get to define that. And that's a fantastic, amazing thing. It's something that most people throughout human history have never had the opportunity to do. So, there are a lot of things to work on in society. We're obviously not perfect. We have issues of racism and sexism that still exist. We have issues of homophobia, transphobia, everything like that. But, nonetheless, here, you can try and be who you want to be. Again, we have inequality issues to work on, but no one's going to force you tomorrow to go and get married to someone just because you're 19, you better go do it and then start a family. It's not good. It's not healthy.
End times for a civilization when people refuse to have children. But given the fact that we now have tools that were absolutely unavailable to previous generations, if dialogue can take place, and that's a big if, maybe we can avert the crash of modern civilization that many key thinkers and intellectuals see upon our horizon.
Everyone's saying it. So many intellectuals are telling me, Donald, civilization is about to collapse. The best. They're the best.
And this will require a paradigm shift in thinking, because masculinity isn't toxic. It's the yin to femininity's yang, and what the real toxicity in our culture is the culture and gender wars promulgated by the real toxic ideologies that have been allowed to spread over the past several decades. And these ideas, similar to Maoism and communism, need to be put on the dustbin.
You're not my dad. Thank you for following.
Or we could just keep going in the same direction we're on and see where this mess that we've created for ourselves leads us.
Honestly, if we can tackle climate change, probably a better place. Seriously. The world, the one thing that's true throughout human history is that while we have our ups and downs, the general trend is upwards. I think Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." And I think that's true. I think most people are moral, ethical people who care about the other people around them, and we want to work together to make society work for everyone. There are always going to be selfish people we have to deal with. There are always going to be people who want to use their own self-interests and put them above the interests of society and the people around them. But over time, we've continued to make a world that's better for people to live in. So, I don't know. But, again, if climate change doesn't kill us all, which, hey, there's a good chance it might. I don't know. Maybe we are in the final salvo that is humanity. But even so, that would be because of our hubris and greed, not because men are eating soy or whatever red pillars seem to be worried about on the current day.